Australia's childcare plan has suffered a setback after a new report called for cheaper options for low-income families. The Productivity Commission recommended free childcare 3 days a week for low-income households and an increase in subsidies for other families. The reforms could cost the budget an extra $5 billion a year. The government says it will consider the findings to ensure all children have access to affordable and high-quality childcare.
The really important thing about this report is that it actually says early childhood education and care is a good in itself. It's good for kids and it's also good for productivity for Australia. We can release the talents of a whole lot of working parents who would love to be back in the workforce or working more days a week if only they could afford the childcare.
So we'll work through those pages and those 56 recommendations. And just as we did in the last term of the coalition government, we'll be seeking to make more places available at the most affordable price for parents.
For more on this, let's bring in National Senate Leader Bridget McKenzie, who joins me live from Canberra. Hi there, Bridget. Always good to talk to you. We've had comments like we'll be working through these proposals. What does that mean? What's the government going to do with these findings?
Well, that's up to the government. I guess what the productivity report makes very, very clear that the coalition's period in government saw a 50% increase in the places available for Australian families, which is fantastic news. We saw an increase, record highs of women getting back into the workforce. Again, great news and shows our commitment to supporting families with their childcare options. I think what is concerning that the government in their 2.5 years has put over $4 billion on the table towards childcare and we haven't seen one extra place created, which is disappointing and obviously causing a lot of concern out there in the community. So we will be working through the paper as well, but it will be interesting to see what the government's response is. And obviously, we've got a strong track record and we want to make sure that Australian families have access to great childcare going forward, and we'll wait to see what the government says.
Can we afford it? Extra $5 billion a year? Is that going to be a political priority for either the government or the coalition?
Well, I think some political commentators have made the point in this morning's newspaper that I thought was quite interesting. The Productivity Commission gave a similar style of recommendations back when it was considering the NDIS, and we've seen that completely blow out in terms of costs across the budget. So we need to be very careful, the parties of government, when considering these types of, options, and make sure that in implementing any policy that there's guardrails around it to ensure that it is affordable and sustainable and does achieve the policy outcomes that the government's seeking to achieve.
On the economic front, we're waiting, just a matter of minutes away for the latest unemployment numbers. And also we've had that larger than expected rate cut out of the US Fed overnight. What do you make of the economy at the moment?
Yeah, I think, anyone that thinking the huge rate cut in comparative terms seen out of the US Fed is good news. It's not. It is a sign that the US economy is in a lot of trouble. And that is bad news, not just for the US, but indeed the globe, given the power of that economy setting global strategies. I think we're concerned looking for the figures. All the economic data released to date shows that household recessions are here with us right now. Australians have spent their savings. They're being smashed on rent and mortgages, and indeed the cost of living is going through the roof. I don't need to tell your viewers that at all. We know, living standards have dropped close to 10% as a result of the government's lack of making strong decisions around the economy. So we'll be watching the figures coming out shortly very, very closely. We've seen big employers shed jobs, not just the mining industry, but huge manufacturers in the last couple of months as a sign again that our economy is weakening. And the Business Council itself made it very, very clear this week that they are cautious to hire. So there are some really concerning signs across our economy that these figures being released shortly will give us more insight into, and again show that Jim Chalmers, talking a big game, is failing on a raft of measures to actually get our economy, make our economy strong and ensure that we are putting downward pressure on inflation and therefore improving living standards for Australia rather than them going backwards as they are now.
And Bridget, in foreign policy, do you agree with Australia abstaining from the UN vote on the Palestine ceasefire and the reasons for doing so?
Yeah, no, I don't agree. Australia should have voted no on this. I think it's an absolutely weak and very flaccid decision by a government and a foreign affairs minister and a prime minister, quite frankly, who are weak on this issue and have been weak from day one. We are heading towards a year since the October 7 massacre and Israel's very measured response in consideration of what happened on that day. And the fact that Australia is running around trying to amend a motion, is abstaining rather than sending what it should have been sending, which is a strong signal to the globe, to Israel, but as importantly here at home, that we do stand with our ally Israel in this war, and we do stand for the principles of freedom and democracy, and that if you are a sovereign nation, you have a right to defend yourself, which is exactly what's happening. So no, I do not support the government's stance on this. Now, if Fiji and Papua New Guinea can stand with Israel and vote against this motion, then it beggars belief, the weak response by this government.
I guess they have different demographics and less to consider politically.
Well, I think if we're going to actually be making foreign policy decisions of this magnitude based on domestic political outcomes, I think then you've lost the plot from a foreign policy perspective. That should be above needing to win seats in Western Sydney. It should be above the Labor Party, feeling the pressure of the Islamic vote in certain areas. It actually needs to be standing up. This is actually probably more a response of the Labor Party against the Greens' stance on these issues. And they're competing against the Greens, not just in federal inner city seats, but at the upcoming Queensland state election. There's going to be a lot of issues where the Greens and the Labor Party are going to head, and who can out-left each other is sort of the talk du jour. And that's concerning because of that internal political fight. They're making appalling decisions on the floor of the UN.
Yes, that's reality. Thank you so much for your time. Bridget McKenzie, Nationals Senate Leader.